and welcome. So as Zena said, I am the SCBA Operations Director. I'm also a novice priest at Soto Zen Meditation here in the Bay Area, and I'll be helping co-facilitate some of our breakout rooms later. I see many familiar faces. This is a part 2 of the series. The part 1 is available on YouTube. If you've missed it, we'll make sure to get that to you. So I want to reintroduce our main speaker today. Roshi Joan Hogetsu Hoeberichts is a psychotherapist specializing in trauma and family therapy. She's also a licensed social worker with her LMFT and MBA, and a priest in the White Plum lineage. She studied with Bernie Glassman, Roshi Taizen Maizumi, and she was given Dharma transmission in 2004 by Jikyo Miller. Roshi has been teaching the Healthy Boundaries for Buddhist Leaders course since its inception, and she's been very kind to offer this 2-part introduction to that series to us, along with some co-facilitators who you'll meet shortly. So Roshi, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you all for being with us.
Well, I see many old friends. Good to see you. Welcome back, and hello to anybody that I haven't met before, and I'm happy to see you too. I want to introduce a couple of my associates. I have with me today to assist Sensei Mark Echo Morris, who is my successor and has taken over Heart Circle Zen in Ridgewood, New Jersey. And Dharma holder, Coach and Tim Weaver, who is also a senior student at Heart Circle Zen and soon to become a sensei. And in addition, we have from our Healthy Boundaries faculty, having one of those senior moments, Plum River Kleinmeyer, who is our operations manager and also the technocrat who's going to support our operation today. So thank you all for being here and assisting in our 2-hour presentation. Okay, I think that's it for introduction. Did I forget anything?
I'll just say a few words, Joan,
Oh, go
about
ahead.
the Zoom side of things. So I'll be supporting the Zoom meeting for the next 2 hours. So if you have any issues, technological issues, please feel free to reach out to me in the chat. We will be having an opportunity for breakout groups during this workshop. So if you would like to opt out of being in the breakout groups, please rename yourself with an X in front of your name. Or if you don't know how to do that, you can also just send me a message opting out. For one of those breakout groups, I'll be putting a number in front of your name, renaming you with a number. That's just to make sure we have a process to go around in that group. So it's not a hierarchy. Thank you all.
Great, thank you, Plum River. So I think I said this last week, but the thing that got me involved in Healthy Boundaries was my own heartbreak at Sanghas falling apart and people abandoning the Dharma because of a bad experience with a teacher who had violated boundaries and had an affair with a student, and basically the whole Sangha would fall apart. And I've seen this multiple times. It's still happening. And I felt like it was a responsibility that we had to make sure that people who were Buddhist leaders really understood the issues involved in boundary violations with students and their responsibility. So I'm going to just quickly review what happened. No, not what happened, what I covered last week. So power is about resources and the agency that they enable, the agency that they give somebody to get things done or to implement change or to help somebody else. Power may take form in social, psychological, spiritual, or physical resources. All of these areas, there are power positions. And the realities of power and vulnerability are always present. They are relational, contextual, and intersectional. So an individual may have more power in one context and less in another. It's not static, it's not binary, it's always relative, spectral, and shifting. So this chart lays out different areas of power and vulnerability. In the center are the power aspects. And we all hold some power aspects. I think we all hold. Maybe some people don't hold any. But the far circle, the one on the outside, are vulnerability. And they hold the possibility of being exploited. And in the middle, of course, are where most of us stand with some vulnerability and some power. So I'm just going to quickly talk about a couple of these. I won't go through the whole chart again. But skin color is one that is really obvious these days, as people with darker skin are getting nabbed by ICE, and people with white skin are not. So that's a vulnerability, and white is a power. Male, cisgender men hold the most power in our society, and trans, intersex, and non-binary folks hold the least power. And even within this vulnerability circle, some people have more or less vulnerability. So this particular block is particularly vulnerable. Trans people are vulnerable today. So I'm not going to go through, I don't know whether most of you were here last week or not, but I think you get the idea pretty quickly. So the power of priests and teachers must serve the student. So some teachers, of course, are lay teachers, but they still hold as much power as a priest teacher. So that authority gives them power. Putting on those robes gives them power. And it's really important that they understand their job, their mission is to serve their students. So what are boundaries? Boundaries keep us safe. I don't know how safe these particular fences are, but I suppose they would keep these particular cars on the road. There are different types of boundaries. There are mental boundaries, which refer to the limits in the sharing of personal information, opinions, thoughts, beliefs, and values. So those mental boundaries are one of the reasons why many of us do not encourage political discussion in our Sanghas. Because our political views, even though they feel like ethical issues to most teachers, certainly to me, they feel like ethical issues, I don't want to take the power that I hold in the Sangha and impose my views on politics, on the rest of the Sangha. And then another group are emotional boundaries. That refers to limits in the realms of feelings and emotions. So it's really important that people who hold power have emotional maturity and understand and sense other people's feelings and their emotions. And then there are, of course, physical boundaries. That refers to limits regarding touch, the body, and any kind of physical contact. And then there are sexual boundaries. and that refers to limits that we set regarding sexuality, whether physical and or emotional, and sexual intimacy. So these are boundaries that keep us safe. And lastly, there are material boundaries, which refer to material resources available like money. So it's very important that Buddhist leaders treat the finances of their community with respect and integrity. Otherwise, they are violating a material boundary. So boundaries differ from person to person and from relationship to relationship. So what's appropriate in a relationship between good friends is not appropriate in a relationship between a teacher and a student. They also differ by culture. And we see this in terms of how close you can get in some cultures and feel comfortable, and in other cultures, it feels uncomfortable. So even standing close to some people in some cultures is appropriate, whereas in our culture, it's not so appropriate to stand so close. And they also differ by social context. So what's appropriate in a family is not appropriate in a formal gathering. So we all know these things, and we operate without sort of holding them in our consciousness. But when we cross them, we recognize that we've crossed them. So in our course, Healthy Boundaries, we distinguish between boundary crossings and boundary violations. So a boundary crossing is something that serves the student, and the boundaries can be reestablished and should be reestablished to the norm by the teacher once the initial reason for crossing the boundary has passed. So for example, in an emotional Doksan meeting, a teacher might reach out to comfort a student, pat them or pat their hand, or in some way offer physical comfort. But once that situation has passed, in the next Doksan, they reestablish those boundaries. Hugs are another example of a boundary that's really complex, because some people, I am, for example, a natural hugger. And I always ask permission before I hug somebody, especially a student. But I always ask. I never offer it without asking. And if it's refused, it's totally okay. I get that. Another one is I often find in Doksan that students want to talk about marital issues or private family issues. And I respect that and allow that, but I feel a little bit like I'm entering into an intimate discussion with them. And I do not bring that back up in a subsequent Doksan, or at least I try not to. I may not be 100% about that. Sometimes I want to check to make sure things are okay. Boundary violations, however, are different. They are when the boundary crossing or the violation is not in the best interest of the student and results in harm. Often the harm is not obvious. The harm may be some form of exploitation. It's using another's vulnerability for one's own benefit. And it can serve the perpetrator's desires and goals and may not be intentional. So often these harms begin to show up in very odd ways. If a teacher crosses a boundary to approach a student in a physical way, a loving way, a tender way, that is really inappropriate and is confusing, very confusing to the student, even if the student thinks they want it. And we're playing on the student's desire to be special. And that desire of a student to be special, which many students hold, they really want to be special to the teacher. And they confuse it with love. But it serves the perpetrator's own desires and goals. So, as I mentioned in my previous presentation, teachers are lonely. Often, even married teachers are lonely. It's a lonely role, teaching. And they may not be fully conscious. Generally, I'd say it's fair to say they're not fully conscious of their own desires and their own goals. So the harm and the exploitation are hidden even from the perpetrator sometimes. Another example is anger, which is a boundary violation. For example, when we are unaware or in denial of the unequal power dynamic in relation to our Sangha, getting angry at a student is a good example of a boundary violation, which is unintentional but still harmful. And so is bullying behavior. Very harmful. So there are different kinds of boundary violations. There's the sexual predators, which I just mentioned. There's financial misconduct, racism, which is really ugly in a Sangha, homophobia or transphobia, also very ugly, bullying, and psychological violations. So boundary violations range in terms of frequency and harmfulness. An emotional boundary violation might involve a leader's inappropriate emotional involvement, such as sharing personal information with a student or becoming overly invested in the student's personal life. So a Buddhist teacher that begins to talk about their unhappiness in their marriage or their relationship with their girlfriend is harming a student. That has nothing to do with the Dharma. Or it might involve actions that damage another person emotionally, including when a leader criticizes, degrades, manipulates, or insults someone, especially publicly. An emotional boundary violation could also involve controlling or manipulating someone's emotions, such as by gaslighting, undermining them, or playing mind games. I want to play this clip that really talks about how an affair gets started between a teacher and a student.
You don't just suddenly find yourself in bed having sex. People would like to think that. Well, it just happened. You know, we had a few drinks and suddenly we were having sex. But that's not actually how it happens when you take it apart.
That by the time you make it to the bedroom and you say that final yes, you said yes 101 unspoken ways along the way. You said yes to the intimacy. You said yes to the isolation. You said yes to the time of day. You say yes to the environment, the location, the type of place you're going to meet. You said yes to some of the fantasies that start to creep up in your own mind. You said yes to what if. So by the time you make it into that bedroom, it's not an accident. It's just a natural extension of a whole bunch of yeses that took along the way.
You're not the victim of, well, we just fell in love.
Well, I kind of messed that up, but I'm not sure how to fix it. So
I think were people able to here. Yeah, Joan, it worked. I shared it from my end.
Oh, you shared it from your end? Oh, great. Thank you. Thank God you're here. All right, let's see if I can get back on. So, speaking up and interrupting a situation that is already occurring is only a small part of being a bystander. So I want to talk about what an engaged bystander is versus just a bystander. A bystander suspects a violation, but is afraid to do or say something, or doesn't know what to do, or thinks it's not their business. This is really prevalent in Buddhist Sanghas. An engaged bystander is willing to intervene. So it's common for bystander Sangha members to be aware of misconduct or abuse and to feel uncomfortable with a situation, even though they often choose not to become involved because they feel it is the teacher's business and not really their concern, or because they may not want to be disruptive or confrontational. Speaking personally, that was my own experience. As a result, no one holds the teacher accountable for ethical violations, even though they may see it or suspect it. It's therefore essential that Sangha members recognize their own responsibilities, their ethical responsibilities for keeping the Sangha healthy and ongoing. If a teacher is behaving in an unethical way, the Sangha needs to feel empowered to step up and call out the teacher on his or her missteps. While the responsibility for a boundary violation lies with the person who has more power in a given situation, the entire Sangha has a role to play in cultivating a culture of respect, looking out for the safety of members, and preventing abuses of power and misconduct. So we're going to break into small groups of 3 or 4 people, and we're going to talk about, I'm going to ask you to talk about this situation that occurs in this particular Sangha. Josh, a student, notices that the teacher, in talking about healthy relationships, always refers only to heterosexual couples, that is, the man and the woman. Josh notices that some gay or gender fluid people in the Sangha show discomfort when these remarks are made. The student has great respect for the teacher and wonders how he would react if he spoke to him about his assumptions and how his speech is not inclusive of JBTQ people in the Sangha. What could Josh say or do? So I'd like you to talk about that. And then also, how is it for you to confront your own teacher? There are lots of different kinds of teachers in the Dharma world. Some are very authoritarian, some are very open, and confronting them, we all have blind spots. It's very easy to see how this can happen, even in somebody who's not consciously homophobic or I don't know what the equivalent for gender variation phobic would be, but transphobic maybe. But how is it to raise this kind of issue? And in fact, they may actually have feelings that are ugly and not appropriate. So, Plum, will you put everybody into their small groups? Welcome back, everybody. I hope your groups were interesting. So, I want to say that Zen practice is a very intimate relationship between teacher and student, and that this is essential to the whole process. So it's very confusing when a teacher missteps, because really we all love our teachers, and as teachers we love our students. So that is very conducive to this notion of falling in love. And one of the things that I've come to believe will make a difference in terms of helping teachers hold that intimacy in a way that has integrity is the idea of an empowered Sangha, where the Sangha feels it's appropriate and right to challenge a teacher, kind of like challenging a parent. And so I'm calling this the development of an empowered Sangha, which will, I hope, help Sanghas move away from the guru model, where the teacher holds all the power, holds all the enlightenment knowledge, whatever that is, and where the students, especially the senior students, are quite comfortable in letting the teacher know that he's, maybe misstepping. So a teacher's task is not just to make sure that a teacher's task is not just to make sure that he's not, or she's not, or they're not causing harm, but also to raise up their students to be models of leadership that will continue this enlightened power, enlightened holding of power. So the teacher himself or herself or their self must believe in the value of an empowered Sangha. This is really important. And there are a number of ways in which we create empowered Sanghas. So that's the first one. The second is that the Sangha needs to develop a code of ethics and a grievance procedure. And the work of developing a code of ethics and a grievance, lost that. The work of developing a code of ethics and a grievance procedure is best done by the Sangha themselves. So, a couple of senior students, or even in a small Sangha, one or two senior students can start to work on a code of ethics and a grievance procedure. And there are some really fine developed codes of ethics and grievance procedures available on the websites of the Zen Center of Los Angeles and the Zen Center of Oregon. Those I personally know and have read myself and respect and admire. Our Sangha used the Zen Center of Los Angeles Code of Ethics to develop ours. It was done largely by Sensei Echo before he was a sensei, and he worked with a couple of more junior members in the Sangha to develop it. And the reason why it's important that this is done by the Sangha and not the teacher is that then the Sangha really owns it. And furthermore, when you begin to teach the precepts to new students, you can incorporate that code of ethics into the precept study. And this makes sure that it's transmitted. It's not just sitting on a shelf somewhere, but each new preceptee understands and knows how that works in their Sangha. In addition, let's see, keep moving this around. In addition, you can establish a couple of people to be a harmony council. I have this at number 6, but it's usually done at the same time as the code of ethics and the grievance procedure is developed. you appoint a couple of people to be in charge of keeping the harmony of the Sangha. So this is called lots of different names, the listening committee, the ear committee, the harmony committee, but they're there to provide guidance and sometimes to actually monitor or facilitate a grievance process. And thirdly, a monthly council practice is a way of flattening the hierarchy in a Sangha. So the Sangha sits in a circle once a month and passes a kind of peace pipe. We used to use a small statue of a Buddha or a rock or something like that. And as it's passed, the person who's holding that speaks, and they speak from their hearts. It's not a counseling session. We don't counsel each other. We don't advise each other. We just listen to what's up for that student. Sometimes there's no theme, and sometimes there is a theme. That depends on what's happening in the Sangha at the moment. It can be very healing when there's a problem. So in a moment, we're going to actually practice and teach the counsel process. Another very important, and the reason why I recommend doing it monthly is it keeps the Sangha healthy. So if there's something simmering under the surface of the Sangha, it has a chance to come up. If you have a very large Sangha with 50 or 60 people that meet weekly, there are council practices that we're not going to go through all of those today, but there are council practices that allow each person to speak. By one person comes out after they've spoken and another person steps in. I forget what the name of that is, but it's essentially a spiral. A fourth really important cultural factor is transparency. So it's, when I was growing up, there was in Sanghas, there wasn't a lot of transparency about finances. And in some Sanghas, it was kept completely secret. Now I think it's more common to share at least once a year what the financial situation is in a Sangha. And that encourages a sense of openness and transparency and honesty and integrity. A fifth thing that's very important is to allow criticism and questions, to allow people, even people who are not very polite about it, to challenge the authority and to challenge the practices of the Sangha and of the teacher. So even if sometimes nothing can be done when somebody challenges a practice and they don't like it, because there are lots of good reasons for keeping it in place, just the fact that we're listening makes a difference. Just the fact that people are allowed to speak their criticism makes it feel like an open culture. So it's a little uncomfortable, but we're trained to be Zen students, and we can tolerate discomfort. So I'm going to introduce counsel practice. So these are the tenets of counsel. First is to speak leanly, allowing time for others. So you speak from the heart, you don't plan what you're going to say, and you definitely do not offer a Dharma talk. This is about personal and spiritual exploration. So you can definitely talk about, for instance, in the counsel practice that we're going to have, you can definitely talk about what this presentation has meant to you, and has it changed your view of your own Sangha, and how comfortable are you with making or offering to make changes in your Sangha to how you do things. And perhaps you're in one of those Sanghas where you're already doing all of these things and don't feel there's a need to make changes. there are really some excellent Sanghas and excellent teachers leading large Sanghas today that do not need, that already incorporate all of these empowering factors. So I congratulate you if you're in one of those, and I hope you'll do everything in your own power to make sure it stays that way. So speaking leanly and allowing time for others in this circle process is really important. And sometimes it's hard for people not to go on. So the facilitator has a responsibility to try to hold and contain the amount of time that the person is speaking. But if everybody is conscious of the need to speak leanly, the facilitator doesn't have to speak in, it doesn't have to step in. And thirdly, the contents of counsel are confidential. People are really sharing from the heart. And sometimes they're talking about things that are difficult to talk about. So it needs to be as safe as possible. And one of the ways of keeping it safety is asking everybody to keep it in confidence. And lastly, in the practice of counsel, it's really important to allow for silence. People are processing what others have said, they're processing what's on their own mind. They're trying to articulate what's going on within themselves. So silence is good. And there's no reason to step in just because it's making you anxious, which it does, to break the silence. So you want to hold on to your own anxiety when you notice it in a counsel process. So now we're going to break into counsel. We're going to spend, let's say by the time we get started, it's 1:45. We'll do 30 minutes, which will take us to 1/4 the hour, which will allow us 15 minutes at the end for any questions and comments that you'll have or may have, and quick closing. So thank you all for your attention today. That's the end of my prepared presentation. I look forward to meeting a group of you in council myself. So I hope you all found your council meeting to be informative and helpful. I want to let you know that there is Sangha Council training available. Actually, there's more than this one, but Sensei Jitsujo Gautier from the Zen Center of Los Angeles is offering weekend council training to Sanghas. And it's in a retreat format, and you'd have to contact her directly. Her email is at the bottom of that screen, jitsujo8@gmail.com. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my slides if I can figure out how to do that.
They're not being shared right now, Joan.
Okay, great. So I'd just like to invite you to raise any questions or comments that you've got for me or for the general audience here. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say. We have roughly 15 minutes left.
So to ask a question, we would appreciate if you could raise your Zoom hand, or you can also put your question in the chat, directing it to probably me for the best, and then I can read it out loud if you'd like to have a more anonymous path to ask a question. But otherwise, we invite you to raise your hand and I'll spotlight you and unmute you next to Joan.
I dropped this question in the chat box last time before we left, but just suggestions help to, like when one or both people refuse to take part in a grievance, conversation.
What to do?
Yeah. like what can be done. Can anything be done?
Does anybody have any ideas?
Give me 1 sec. I'll give people the ability to unmute.
It could be processed in council. Do you do council in your Sangha?
So just to be completely transparent, I'm from the Zen Center of Los Angeles. We do have that wonderful Sangha Sutra, and it does fail when one or both parties refuses to cooperate. So I was just curious if anybody has any experience or, thoughts.
Yeah, if I may, um, we dealt with that quite heavily, meaning there were folks on the board who said, "Wow, I don't want to have to deal with this," meaning they didn't want to have a one-on-one. We encourage a one-on-one conversation first, but then if that doesn't seem to work, we then invite the individual who feels harmed to submit a request to our Ethics and Restoration Committee. And the idea being that if you feel harmed and you feel that that it's so dramatic that you need to present it to somebody else, we've created this third party. It's not part of our Sangha. It's leaders in the community as a general statement. And they deal with it, and their word is what happens at the end of it. And it's all based on the concept known as restorative justice. And if you would Google restorative justice, you'll find a lot of good information about that.
Thank you, Jean. It's really difficult if somebody refuses to process a complaint without being totally involved in the situation, I don't have any quick answers to it. But thank you for raising the question, Miyoki. Anybody else have a comment or question?
Can I just tag on to that? I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I think to Miyoki's point, and I'm experiencing this personally, is that it creates a fissure within the Sangha, and it does real damage. So there's the logistical perspective, right? Of we can't bring these two people to the table to sit down, but the real issue, I think, is that, I mean, the deeper issue, maybe that might be the wrong word, but it's just the damage that does, because it creates a fissure within the Sangha. And when it's in a place of spiritual practice, it's really hard to see. So.
Yeah, I was wondering if it were processed in council and everybody in the council talked about what the impact was on them, that these two people could not make an effort to reconcile, or one person refused to go through a reconciliation process, if that might feel better to everybody, that at least they were able to talk about it and about how it was affecting them. That's the only clue that I can see that could be helpful.
Hello. So I've mentioned before that I belong to a Sangha where we have been dealing with the aftermath of accusations of ethical violations. And we tried to set up conciliation, as you've described, and one of the parties refused to participate, which basically involved leaving the Sangha completely. But that didn't stop the fissure, because people picked sides, and some people left along with that other person and really diminished the Sangha and left, I think I've described it as like a traumatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
But we have had other people who, in the aftermath of that, also were accused of abuses. And when they participated in the process, they stayed in the Sangha. And people felt connected with those people who like opened it up. And again, I don't know, in a way, it kind of goes back to some of our core practices, like the repentances. So one person wouldn't repent, the other people repented.
Yeah,
But
that's a really good point.
Either way, it's challenging, even if you go through the conciliation process. But even if you're not directly involved, there's still the possibility that people will take sides, and it will still create that fissure in the Sangha. And I don't know if anybody has comments about how their Sangha sutras might help prevent this kind of situation. Excuse my cat.
I don't know that the Sangha Sutra is the answer when you've got the problem already in front of you. The Sangha Sutra is it's a code of ethics, and it's a guideline, but it doesn't prevent unethical practices. But what does help is council practice, where you are all sitting in a circle and processing what the whole thing has meant to you and how painful it is to see the Sangha fall apart and to see your teachers who you revered and respected misbehave. So that is incredibly healing to process that as a group, even though it's painful. Anybody else have any comments on that? The Brooklyn Zen Center situation is really heartbreaking. That's what got me into this work. Not that one specifically, but it's one of that in a long line of sanghas that have fallen apart as a result of misconduct.
I'm thinking that what you said, Joan, about the Sangha Sutra being used, needed to be used in the first place, so as to avoid the situation from developing. Sometimes I really fault myself because I sometimes see things early, but I don't do something about them until they get to the point where it's severe. And I'm thinking of one situation where a person came to the Sangha who had a pattern behavior before she came. And I chose to allow her to be innocent when she came to the Sangha. I shouldn't have done that because I kept accepting her and accepting her and accepting her for many years, and I didn't realize how she was really alienating people in the Sangha. Finally, as a group, not just me, we just have to ask her to leave. And she was not a bad person. She'd done many beautiful things, but she was very disturbing to many people. And she brought it with her originally. And I was hoping that practice would just change that. And yeah.
I've made the exact same mistake. Because practice is transformative, and you don't know who's going to be transformed and who isn't. So it's hard. It's hard being a teacher. It's really hard. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, well, my name is Haju. Yeah, I'm right now.
I know who you are, but I don't know if anybody else does.
Yeah, and I'm in Michigan, and it's cold in Michigan right now. I think we're gonna get snow tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can come stay with us in LA, Haju. It's nice here today.
Hi, Roshi.
Hi, Echo.
So something came up in our chat group and our council group, and it got me thinking about. I think unlike a lot of other spiritual traditions, Zen teachers are typically grown from within the community that they originally practiced with. And so as they become teachers, their relationships with all their Dharma friends shift somewhat. And this can be a difficult transition for everybody involved, but especially for the teacher. I'm wondering if there's be appropriate from some training on how to deal with that to be added to the course, or maybe some other venue.
We covered in the 5-week course,
I
but
do.
it's not in this greatly abbreviated 2 presentations. But I completely agree that that's a very complex transition, very complex. And thank you for pointing it out. Okay, so we are at the end of our time. I thank you all very much for your attention, and I wish you all lots of luck with your Sanghas and your teachers and your students, depending on where you are in the hierarchy. And I hope, I think there's an evaluation form that would be very helpful if you could fill out. And Keegan, do you have anything